And we started with very small amount of investment, just 2 co-founders, and kind of like a dream to help students out because that's what we wanted to do. And since then, we've gotten to 2 million students on our platform. We have companies all around the world working with us at Forage, and we have we have offices in New York, London, Sydney, San Francisco, and stuff. Like it's just so trippy that we've been able to do this from small little Sydney. And for me, it's just kind of like growing up in this context where I've just never seen anything like that before. So that's kind of like us at Forage, and a bit of like our journey to why we started Forage and why we built Forage. And yeah, we drive these kind of beautiful results. I think really like before I kind of like end my ramble, kind of like the 2 things that I think are really fascinating to kind of like, I'd love to kind of like impart as high level ideas before we get into Q&A, is that we're in a really lucky period of time where people of different backgrounds can actually create cool and amazing companies that help people out. And I think we're in a really lucky period of time where when it comes to building amazing organizations, like you can do that in a way where you can build products or businesses that, the better your business become, that take these countries to the next level. And I think the passion and the energy is infectious in them. And I think it's also just quite amazing that these opportunities exist. So I think second note is like for those students that are from those areas, like, I think be excited. I think there's an optimistic and exciting future ahead. And if you do have any questions about that kind of like, building businesses in those regions, feel free to ask as well. So that's kind of my quick ramble. I hope that was a high level of everything. And maybe I'll pass it back to you, Mariam and Tip, as we get to the next part of the result. All of those markets. Most companies I know that work in like those kind of markets are domiciled in Singapore as well. So like it's not like Singapore has a small market. You just go like you're a stone's throw away from like some of the biggest markets out there. But yeah, I think the advantage of Australia is that there is an ecosystem of talent and ability that already exists. Relatively like well educated and has experienced high growth like companies and stuff. But it does have a downside, which is like what we had to learn when we went overseas was how to actually act in a bigger market because there are funny dynamics about that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really like your point on how comparing Australia to the crazy hustle culture in America. I feel that, if I'm not wrong, the work-life balance in Australia is better.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, the thing about Australia is like weather is generally so good that like people want to go outside and work, and we don't have like a big hustle culture trying to be a billionaire. Again, like the US is a different culture. People whine about that for hours, but I think they are different in the sense that it helps equip you for different things, and Australia is actually a very good place for that. Learning from like deep expertise in different areas, but not having that big market. And of course, if you have a big market, big hustle culture is great because you can be successful in this.
Right, thank you so much. I've actually got a couple other questions, but I won't hog this space.
I'll throw it to someone else and then come back to them.
Yep, we can always come back to you. Bella, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a question?
No, sorry, I just joined.
Oh, that's all right.
I get to get my microphone.
No worries. Does anyone else want to ask a question?
Have diligence, right? I love seeing people have the diligence to kind of learn, proactivity to kind of figure things out. So that's kind of like implicit in all of our programs. The second thing is one of the most common things to kind of see is actually just like really basic rules. Like I think the university setup doesn't really set you up to understand things like doesn't set you up to understand things like how to send an email in a client context, how to update PowerPoint presentations, how to use Excel in a practical manner. And I think that's kind of that's kind of one of the things we help bridge. So it's really the practical step-by-step stuff that help us help you become knowledgeable from day one. And that's kind of what they all.
Mau makan itu nggak apa yang itunya apa? Batu sauda.
More questions in the chat box.
Cool. I think All right, I'll go with Christian's question first. So, do we have any programs related to veterinary studies coming up? We're trying. Veterinary studies is a pretty tough one to build because you can't really train someone through a virtual work experience to be taking care of animals. And I think there are some things that we probably won't do, which is like I think raw diagnosis. That's actually, mind you, there are a few ways I was thinking about that, but like I think right now we can probably do more. We're looking to do stuff more on the health administrative side and the health strategy side. It's kind of like above and not the actual diagnosis of itself. So yeah, we are looking to kind of expand more generally into health and more generally into health around the management elements of it all. Mariah's asked a question about putting the internships as experience in our resumes. The answer is yes. So every program basically has a setup that allows you to put your virtual work experience in like the extracurricular section, and you kind of put your unique ID on there so they can verify it, and it's kind of basically a good way to show also like that you're interested in kind of those fields and put the time in. The reason it's interesting is as well is that some systems try to like they bubble some students up because they have fancy brand names on their resume. So this is a little hack for many people to kind of bubble up a bit easier and a bit faster. So that's so yeah, you can put it on your resume. Just don't make it off as like a proper paid internship in like the summer period, because it wasn't. But we try to push the gap because not a company can't hold 5,000, 100,000 interns in their office. So we're kind of that in between, but not exactly internship. We don't try to replace internship. What we try do is kind of get you land that job regardless of where you are for free and in your own time, and then B, show these companies that you're worth looking at. Cool. Any more questions or anything that might bubble up as well?
Another question related to that. So since I know that these programs, they have like, you can upload your work and everything. So can that work actually, Andy, they will be shared with the companies themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you sign up to a program, we actually ask this question: do you want your work and your profile to be seen by a firm? You can always opt out of it. So we try to provide students a safe and non-stressful place to learn these things, because there's no it's not fun anymore if you make an exam, and it's not a good way to learn if you feel like you're being assessed on it. But when you do sign up, you can click yes, so you can opt in for your profile to be seen and your work being seen. Sometimes if you opt into yes, sometimes we actually have HR jumping to the other side of our platform, which is for the companies, and they'll sift through some of the applications and reach out to them. So the advice though I give if you were to go down that path is to really I think one of the checklists is really for starters, if you want to be successful or a good kind of outcome, you kind of have to put in at least the beginning, unless you hit lucky, a fair bit of work up front, So I think you should be extremely talk to your potential users. You should really try to emphasize and understand. There's no point being theoretical at that point when you're starting out. It's like talk to people that you think will be your customers, and then try to solve their problems, and then on the flip side, just build it incredibly fast to figure out how to do it very well. And I think there's nothing, and then it's like, don't try to, when you try to solve the problems, try to solve the problems from first principles rather than just copying what already exists. I think extremely talking to your potential customers, extremely trying to build for them, I think is a really good baseline for anyone. And this is even before you make any money and even before you think about business strategy and stuff like that. The thing is, like, some people can do that really well. But if you're if you're kind of at that first stage of trying your first company out, that's probably way more valuable than thinking about big giant market opportunities that exist in the second part of your question was more like, what's the difference between pursuing corporate and startup working life? It's an interesting one because it's a bigger question for this generation, or everyone here today, right? Like, should you work at a startup or should you work at a big corporate company? Our big giant startups like corporate companies, it's kind of a funny question. So I'll kind of break it down into kind of a few parts. One is corporate companies are a really good place to learn professionalism and also understand how to kind of engage in that big world of corporate system. My graduate job was in the strategy consulting arm, and at the end of the day, that was actually still hugely valuable to me. You know, like deciding for it as well. It gave me some clout and some trying to kind of start this company with my co-founder Tom. Made us kind of like we could speak corporate, right? You know, when you know that world speaks in a certain way. Professionalism is quite key, and this goes quite valuable regardless of wherever you go afterwards. Being able to understand end-to-end problems. And all large organizations. Like there is a lot of value joining corporate. It is slightly different. You might not learn everything, but you do what you can do for a good corporate organization is really figure out and learn from people who have experience as well. The flip side is there are sometimes where like they're a bit slower on some things, but it's not because they're slower for slow's sake. Sometimes it's because they have to go through more legal things because they're bigger. As you get bigger, you have more things kind of slow you down. Gravity is a thing, but it's good to learn those kind of nuances and also learn kind of like how that world works. In terms of like joining startups, I would say like there's a stage where companies are large startup and there's a small startup. Large startups are good because you kind of get a bit of both worlds in the sense that you can learn a lot about like this larger space. You have to have processes. You have to learn how to navigate complex organizations to deliver really cool things. And you basically are tasked with a lot of responsibility. So yeah, I mean, the pressure in these large startups is the pressure is there, right? Because they need someone who just comes in, even though you're a student or just kind of very recently graduated, to deliver real value for them very early on. So the pressure is also like you have people to learn from. I mean, they're pretty on that front as well. But the flip side is, yeah, there's a bit more pressure on you. Now, small startups are kind of interesting. You know, if you join a small that has some customers, so I wouldn't recommend joining too many startups that haven't already got too much traction or think it's more. If you do join a startup with some level of like growth traction, the real value, in my perspective, there is basically becoming an expert. Like, you know, like we started 4.5 years ago. 2 interns joined 4 years ago, and they're still with us. And the crazy thing is, like, you know, like basically managers in their own right, but they're still at university, they're still super young, and they have a lot of responsibility. The flip side is they've had to figure out a lot themselves, and they've had to grow and adapt in a way that is relatively uncomfortable, a bit chaotic. But you know, like they're far better off on it. But it's tough and it's not easy. And I think part of it as well, like if it is a good company, it's not going to be obvious to everyone outside of the company for a while as well. You know, like why don't you go work for Microsoft or Amazon or Google? So the trade-offs are if you are at a small startup, hopefully you find a good team and then are able to kind of survive there. But the trade-off, you know, the flip side is you will have to figure out a lot more yourself. And not all startups end up at the size where it becomes super impressive. So it's kind of, yeah, there are risks and trade-offs. So, you know, different benefits and different costs, and everyone's slightly different. So, you know, I don't think there's one perfect path for a student.
Thank you, Masha. Those were some great insights into the startup. Cindy, do you have a question? Because I saw you in your camera. I also want the audience to know that we have about 5 minutes left, so please ask your questions. This is the. Do you have a question?
Oh, we have more questions.
Cool. Mark's question is what is the most rewarding experience you've had? You know what's really cool about building Forage, I think, and to answer Mark's question, is that we get to build a company that helps people out, and actually is a very cool business at the same time. So we get stories every day of students who are able to land their first job because of the Forage program. We help single mothers who have kids, going through university, and because our platform is do it at their own pace, you know, and they're busy taking care of a child during the day, like, you know, like we're their only chance to kind of build up work experience, and they can use that to then land a job at top law, something else that really goes on. I think the cool thing is, I think there's a lot of countless ones. I think being able to help students and all around the world, you know, like this is like the US, this is Singapore, this is the Philippines, Indonesia, the UK, you know, one of the students from like Kazakhstan and Nigeria telling us something comes from that. And I think it's incredibly cool to kind of like do that. And on the flip side, like, like I think it's just so cool that we get to wake up every morning, work on something that helps people out, work on something making things way better, and then get more kind of stuff happening on that front. So yeah.
Papa nanya lagi?
Cool.
Belum. Perubahan iklim.
Those are a few more questions. We've got time.
We have about 5 minutes. We just have 2 more questions.
Cool. All right. Well, I've got Mohammed asking a question, which is like, will we have more topics on climate change and stuff? Yes, we will. We will have questions on. We'll have programs coming out with like more law firms and industrial firms of climate change. We actually have 2 programs right now. One is with a chance in the UK, which basically delves deeply into climate change law. And I think that was like quite detailed and quite good. We've seen a lot of great students kind of like loving the fact that they can actually mix the passions of law and public climate change and a few other things as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely more, and I think we're trying to like work with more organizations to drive this through. Whether it be with like the UN or whether it be with other nonprofits and companies as well and startups as well. So I think it's super exciting. Answer Jostine's question as well. Internship for Australian agribusinesses. Yes, we're trying. There's actually 1 or 2 clients that we're talking to kind of like try to pull that one through. So watch that space. There's also global agribusinesses as well. There's a huge set of there's a huge industry there that is crying out for really more graduates to kind of join. Realize that this is making a great market in the first place. But yes, I think Abigail's also got another question. We'll throw someone else to look at it. Abigail's asked, what advice we give someone who joined the programs and are having trouble juggling full-time work? Abigail, your question is great. We've made the programs to be doing your own time and pace for that. But if you do get stuck, free to like ask for support or to ask on LinkedIn where you are finding it tough. We know it's hard for students. Like we made for it to be free and do it at your own time.
Tinggal pencet open video ya kalau mau melihat buka video.
Extracurriculars, studying,
Nah, di sana aja say
and have a
goodbye.
chance to land a job. So we know it's tough, and we try to do our best to set it up so that we make it easier for students.
5
as
menit
well.
katanya.
The good thing is, we try to keep it to 3 to 5 hours, and you can literally take months to finish them off. So if you just put yourself an hour every week to it, or something like that, I think that's it. And if you get stuck, feel free to go online and look for resources to help you out there. We've tried to make it open access so anyone can kind of learn from that and have a safe space to learn from it, as well as the thing is, we know that firms still like that you finish your program even if you've taken 6 months to do it, because usually that's because you're super busy and they understand that. So yeah, definitely pace yourself, take your time on that front.
Amazing. Okay, so we can take one last question, and then unfortunately we will have to end this session. Does anyone want to go or?
Not honestly, I think my last comment then I guess would be mainly just for everyone here. There's a lot of opportunity kind of coming ahead for everyone here, especially if you're in the Australian ASEAN region. I think definitely be proactive about it. I think there's actually a lot of cool things going your way on that front, and really with kind of the skills that you can gain on Forage and just the networking from these kind of things and the things you can learn from this all, be proactive about that, and I think you can really set yourself up for being able to have great impact and an awesome kind of setup for what I would consider the next 5 to 10 years, because the theme of the event is conflict and cooperation, but honestly there's also just a huge amount of opportunity coming up for everyone here. But yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir, for being our network partner today, and thank you to the audience for attending our network session. This was great, but unfortunately, this is where we conclude our session.
Gimana kelihatannya adek? Bapak kelihatan nggak?
Thanks everyone.
Mana? Oh, kepala bapak nggak kelihatan.
Please feel free to join us for the next panel discussion.
Enggak apa-apa. Background nggak apa-apa.
Thanks guys for coming.
Dah bye bye. Soalnya ya hilang bahasanya udah.